Hey guys, so today's video is something that I've been wanting to touch on for a while. One of my favorite movies of all time, especially my favorite horror movie, has always been The Exorcist, and a lot of people don't know that there is a convicted killer acting in the film. I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that there was a so-called curse on the set of The Exorcist, which could be a whole nother video if you guys are interested in that. A lot of mishaps, a lot of deaths and stuff supposedly involved with the making of the film. So I guess you could say that this is a part of that if you believe in that curse. I will try and insert a photo or a clip from the film here. But the killer who acted on the set was hired as an extra in the film, and he was specifically in the hospital scene. If you know the film, you know that Regan is going through a lot of testing, a lot of medical testing to determine what could be wrong with her. And one of the tests that they put her through is, I believe, an angiogram. And a lot of people think that when they hear about people fainting and stuff when they saw The Exorcist, that it's because of the supernatural aspect. That's not necessarily the case. Most of the people who fainted in the film or got ill and things like that were from this medical scene, actually, because it was very realistic and they wanted it to be that way. And there was some blood involved and stuff, and it just made people very uncomfortable, but it's also praised by the medical community for being very accurate. Now, Paul Bateson is the murderer in question here, and he was a real radiographer who was hired for the film. He appeared as the radiological technologist in the hospital scene who's helping Regan. He does have a few lines. He's helping her move from table to table, and he's helping perform the test. Now, a little backstory on Paul Bateson. He was born in 1940, and he grew up in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. And he was the son of a metallurgist. He would later suggest that his appearance in The Exorcist was revenge on his father for punishing him as a child by making him stay home from Saturday matinees at the local movie theater and forcing him to listen to opera on the radio instead. He served in the Army in the early 1960s, where he began drinking heavily from boredom while stationed in Germany, which began a lifetime struggle of alcoholism for Bateson. After his discharge, he returned to Lansdale and stopped drinking for a while. In 1964, he moved to New York City, where he actually began a relationship with a man. Now, he would later describe himself as not exclusively gay. He may have been bisexual. We do not know. He's never really come out as one or the other, but he began this relationship with a man who he said was involved in music, and the relationship was marked by heavy drinking. 5 years later, Bateson's mother actually died from a stroke, and his younger brother committed suicide. Bateson then trained as a neurological radiological technician and began working in that capacity. After his relationship with this man ended in 1973, he moved to Brooklyn, and from there he commuted to his job at the New York University Medical Center, where he was well liked and respected by his colleagues. Now, in late 1972, William Friedkin, who was the director and filmmaker of The Exorcist, was preparing to make the film. He knew that he wanted to show some medical procedures, and he was also looking for staff at the time who might be willing to be extras in the film for these medical procedures. So he decided that he was going to be filming some of these procedures at New York University, and Dr. Barton Lane invited him to watch a cerebral angiography. Now, at the time, the angiographies were performed by placing a needle in the patient's carotid artery, which is in the front of your neck, in order to insert a catheter. And from that catheter, they would be able to insert contrast, which helps your veins be more easily seen through x-ray. Now, Friedkin was really impressed with what he saw, especially the bloodiness of it, because when the catheter is placed, there's a moment between the catheter being placed and the contrast being inserted where blood is sort of pumping out with the patient's heartbeat, and that's what you actually see in the film. And he was really impressed with the procedure, and he was really impressed with the staff, and he asked that they perform it for the film. And this included Bateson, who was the technician at the time, and the doctor who had invited Friedkin to watch the procedure recalled that Bateson was the best technician he had ever had. Now, around the time that The Exorcist was released, Bateson had started heavily drinking again. In 1975, it actually began to affect his job performance and he was let go. He sustained himself with odd jobs and joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was actually looking for another relationship with a man, hoping to start a long-term relationship. However, by 1977, the drinking had become more and more heavy. On September 14th of 1977, Addison Verrill, who was a reporter who covered the film industry for Variety magazine, was found dead in his apartment. He had been beaten and stabbed. There were some signs of a struggle, however, there was no sign of forced entry, which did lead to police to believe he had invited in his killer. And a gay activist and writer, Arthur Bell, who was a friend of Verrill's, actually wrote an article about the case in the Village Voice, stating how he felt like at the time police sort of ignored these types of murders. There had been a string of murders of gay men in the area, and he felt that police were sort of ignoring them, thinking that they had invited the danger in by having a night with another man. Now, in this article that Bell wrote, he did end it by giving the phone number to the New York Police Department's Homicide Bureau and asking that anyone with any information, of course, call in. 8 days after the killing, someone did call, and this person claimed to be the killer himself. He was quoted to have said, "I like your story, and I like your writings, but I'm not a psychopath." Now, the caller also recounted the night of the murder. He said that he was gay and needed money, and that he was also an alcoholic. And after 3 months of sobriety, he claimed that Verrill had they had met at a bar and Verrill had bought him a lot of drinks. At 3 a.m., they left that bar and went to another where they continued drinking alcohol and doing drugs. The caller told Bell that he was impressed with how popular his friend Verrill was and that he wanted to go home with him. After 2 hours, they took a taxi to Verrill's apartment where the two had more alcohol and cocaine, followed by sex around 7:30 a.m. The caller said he realized afterwards that that was as far as Verrill seemed to want the relationship to go. And he said, "I needed money and I hated the rejection." So still intoxicated, he decided to do something he had never done before. He took a frying pan and struck Verrill over the head with it, crushing his skull, and then took a knife and stabbed him to death. After the killing, the caller stated that he had stolen cash totaling $57, Verrill's Master Charge credit card, his passport, and some clothes. He stated that he wanted to atone for what he had done, but he couldn't give himself up because his license would be taken away. Now, Bell tried to ask him what type of license he was talking about, and he said he couldn't tell him because that would give him away. And he was speaking of his medical license. When Bell contacted the police about the call, they took it very seriously because they had not released to the public that the credit card had been stolen, so they believed this caller was the killer. Detectives suspected that the caller would call Bell again, so they decided to go to his apartment and wait. At 11 p.m., his phone rang, but it was another voice. It was a man identifying himself as Mitch. He told Bill that the caller was Paul Bateson, and this was based off of information that Bell had written about in the magazine that he worked for. Mitch stated that he had gotten to know Bateson at St. Vincent's Hospital, and he told them that Bateson was an unemployed x-ray tech and that he had actually called Mitch earlier and confessed to the crime. Mitch had asked to meet Bell in person, but the police told Bell not to do so. The police went ahead and just arrested Bateson from his apartment where he was lying around drunk. When they asked if he knew why he was being arrested, he actually pointed to the magazine that Bell wrote for and said he had a feeling it was something to do with that, meaning the article that Bell had written. Bateson was charged with second-degree murder and was detained while awaiting trial. Now, at the time of Bateson's arrest, police had also began investigating a string of 6 other murders of gay men, which they believed were connected to the same killing. However, these corpses had been found dismembered in bags floating in the Hudson River, and there just wasn't enough evidence to pin Bateson to those crimes. Bateson, through his attorney, began attempting to suppress his confession. He argued that he had been drunk at the time and that the police had not yet read him his rights. He also denied having made the phone call to Bell, and he claimed that his confession was just based on what he had read in the magazine that Bell wrote for. Bateson went on trial in early 1979. The state entered both his confession and Bell's Voice article into evidence against him. Bateson was convicted after only 4 days on March 5th of 1979. At his sentencing a month later, prosecutor William Hoyt called him a psychopath and reiterated his belief that Bateson was responsible for the other 6 murders. He stated that Bateson had actually confessed to those murders to a friend, Richard Ryan, who had testified at the trial. However, Bateson denied ever confessing to this. Justice Morris Goldman sentenced Bateson to 20 years to life in prison, 5 years less than the minimum that Hoyt had asked for. He ultimately found no connection to the other murders. Bateson ended up serving 24 years and 3 months of his sentence, becoming eligible for parole in 1997. On the day after his 63rd birthday, in August of 2003, he was released from prison. According to online sources, his parole was successfully completed in November of 2008. Now, the last public known record of Bateson is this completion of his parole, and there is no information as of 2019 as to where he is living, if he's even alive, or any other information regarding where Bateson's whereabouts are. In a podcast interview in 2018, William Friedkin stated that he had heard that Bateson was living somewhere in upstate New York, and there's a record in the Social Security Death Index showing that a Paul F. Bateson with the same birth date and Social Security number issued in Pennsylvania had died on September 15th of 2012. So that is the story of the killer on the set of The Exorcist. You may hear him referred to as a serial killer, but because he was only committed for one murder, that is actually an incorrect profile. But I just always thought it was interesting and just a really creepy detail to the film. But that's all I have for today. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions for video ideas, true crime or otherwise, please leave those in the comments below. If you would like to see more, please hit the subscribe button. I do upload new videos every Wednesday. And other than that, I will see you guys next week. Bye.